Coming up next on At Your Service, we'll be discussing supports for military families. Stay tuned.
Today on At Your Service, we have Ms. Carol Chobany, Navy School Liaison Officer. Welcome.
Thank you.
Describe the military community, if you would, in Anne Arundel County, and who they are and where they live.
Thank you for having me.
Sure.
In Anne Arundel County, we're very fortunate that we have two very large military institutions, the Naval Academy and Naval Support Activity Annapolis, as well as Fort Meade. Within those two installations, we have many military families. There are approximately 7,000 students in Anne Arundel County public schools who are military connected. And that kind of works out to be between 8 and 9% of our student body who are military connected students. They live in every corner of the county. Every zip code, every school in Anne Arundel County has some military connected student, whether their family is in the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Marines. They might be in a reserve or guard family, but they are everywhere. Now, having said that, we also have some students who live on base at the Naval Academy or at Naval Support Activity Annapolis, and certainly at Fort Meade. So our families are here, they are everywhere, and those students are attending our public schools.
I'm going to ask a question. Has military families increased with all the things that are happening over at Fort Meade? And we talk about just the transition of bringing more military families into this area and the impact. Has it grown increasingly within the last 5 years?
I would say with the BRAC that happened in the past decade or so, absolutely, we've had more families move in, particularly to the Fort Meade area. That has really mushroomed in terms of numbers of families.
And do the majority of students live, I think the majority of students do not live on base.
Absolutely, that is a true statement. In fact, that's something that schools sometimes forget when we see that we have military installations or bases in our area. We're thinking, well, everybody lives on the base, and that is absolutely not true. Not only here, but it's not true around the country. Our folks are living in the communities everywhere. Just a very small percentage of them actually live on military installations at this point in time.
Right, so we also have families that are not active military but also work for the Department of Defense that are attached some way, shape, or form that work for the federal government as well.
Absolutely.
So I know that we have quite a few families in this area.
This area we consider the National Capital Region, and we have some what they call joint base situations where you have an Army and a Navy base joining together. You have a Navy and a Marine joining together. So this is a very unusual area, this National Capital area. So we have some very significant institutions here. The United States Naval Academy is here, the Cyber Command at Fort Meade, some very well-known institutions.
Well, let's turn our attention to your role, because you're the School Liaison Officer for the Navy, and I know you have a counterpart as well for the Army. Well, what is your role, and how do you support students and families and that connection to the school community?
As a School Liaison Officer, we are the link between the military community, the commands on the bases, on the installations. We are the link between that, our families as they move in and out of the area, and the bigger community, the community at large. And why you would need someone like me, it's very, very important because our families are on the move all the time. They're coming, they're going. The kids who are enrolling in our schools may not be here in 2 or 3 years. So having that opportunity to have someone link all of those services, the people, the institutions that are supporting these families, having that opportunity to have someone like me, and I do have a counterpart at Fort Meade, an Army School Liaison, and we work very closely together with our families. We provide that, they call it a smooth handoff from one place to another. So most of my time is spent on what we call school transition kinds of things, making sure that when our family is coming from Italy, Germany, Texas, Washington State, that they know the school system, that they know the options for schooling when they arrive here in Anne Arundel County, and they're able to make really good informed decisions. I work very closely with the school system, doing things like this, making sure that the school community knows and understands what our military families are needing and what they can bring to the table on their side, I think is very important. I do work with families who are experiencing deployments. And when we say deployments, we're talking about family members, the active duty member going away for a significant amount of time. And even though things have slowed down in terms of the activities that our service members have been involved in, there are still deployments. They are still happening.
Correct.
Our military families will always be on the move, whether it's a deployment or just a move to a new duty station. Helping schools understand what that deployment cycle is like, helping families understand that there are resources for them when they are experiencing a deployment. And then probably the third thing is just really keeping those lines of communication open between the military installations and our school system. We have a lot to offer on both sides, so it's really exciting to be able to bring those two sides together and make sure everybody is receiving the benefits from both sides.
So you're often the voice for the families in the situation. So in thinking of that, what would you say for the children, what would you say what would they like to say through you that the school system would like to know?
Well, it's been fascinating to meet these families. I've been an administrator here in Arundel County and knew some of the families from that situation. But these kids are just amazing. They are, as a group, very, very resilient. They're very strong. Having said that, they're not invulnerable, but they are very resilient as a group. You know, you have a young man in my office the other day, and I said, well, how many schools have you been to? And he starts counting on his fingers, and he's going to 4, 5, 6 schools. But that is the norm. That's the norm in that community. And that's what they would want you to know. We're strong, we're resilient, and we are on the move.
Right.
We come from places that other students may have only seen in a geography book or on a map somewhere. We have family members who serve our country, who have chosen to serve our country, and we are very proud of that. We take school seriously for the most part. That's sort of part of that military culture, that the family members really do value education. And we have unique stressors that other students just in their growing up years may not face. So I think all of those things would be things that kids would want people to know about them and to just really know them. Where are you coming from? Where have you been? Tell me about what it was like when you lived in Spain or Germany or Italy or Japan. And you know, just bringing all of that experience to the table.
So how, in your role, how do you help students who are military families look at their options for schooling, especially when they're going from one duty to another duty?
Well, usually the families are, as you would expect, pretty savvy when they understand that they're coming to Anne Arundel County, whether it's to the Naval Academy or to Fort Meade. First thing they do is look online. So they're looking to see what supports they can see within the Anne Arundel County Public Schools, for example, if they're coming from a public school setting to our public school setting. So they'll look online, they'll see what are the schools like. They will check out school scores. They will check out the report card from the Maryland State Department of Education. If we're very lucky, they'll make contact with someone like me from the receiving end. So families coming from California, hopefully that school liaison in California is connecting that family to me here so that we can do that really, like I said, they call it a smooth handoff.
So does every state have the liaison officers?
We are in everywhere there's an installation or a base around the world, there's somebody like me.
Okay. Has it always been that way?
No.
Oh, okay.
The Army, I think, was the first to come on board with school liaisons. Marines followed. Navy just came on board back in 2009. So, and I think that speaks to the Department of Defense and the various branches understanding how important these quality of life issues to our families are. You know, I often say to folks that once a military family finds out where they're going, where they're being sent, they have their orders, The next thing they want to know is, where am I going to live? And the very next question is, where are my kids going to go to school? And that is so critically important, and that won't change.
Well, that's a huge stressor right there for a family. You know, that I think that as a school liaison, that is a big help that you will have, helping them in that transition. What other stressors are there that the families go through that you work with them?
There are some things that are unique. It's the moving, I think, that really kind of strikes everyone right off the bat, because you move when the Navy or the Army tells you to move. You don't get to move perhaps over the summertime or over the winter break or whatever. You're moving when they tell you. You're moving from a state or another country where perhaps the curriculum has been somewhat similar, especially with Common Core coming on board, but perhaps the rigor has been different than we would find here in Arundel County. And that's something that I feel like I can do with families. So many times there's an anxiety about making that move. What's it going to be like? You know, are they going to have classes bigger than the school system I came from? I was in a magnet program in Florida. Am I going to have that opportunity to be in a magnet program here in Arundel County? And then we have other families who make other choices. They may be going the private school route. They may be going a homeschool route. We have some number of families, both here in Annapolis as well as at Fort Meade, who are homeschooling.
Correct.
So again, that's something that the school liaison can help with, connect them here to the school system, make sure they get registered, they know the portfolio process. So it just sort of helping that school piece be as easy as possible.
Yeah. So the impact on learning and student learning, that's probably a huge concern or worry for parents, you know, just transitioning from one place to another. Is there a huge impact on students' learning? Do we know for military families that are deployed and students that travel to multiple different schools, do they have more difficulty with their education or staying attuned to where they need to be in their placement?
I would say it's probably true of any child who moves. It kind of depends on when you move. If you're a little one, if you're in kindergarten, perhaps that first move is just making new friends and figuring out where your cubby is and where the lunchroom is. But as you age and you're moving more frequently, then you're getting into the high school years. You're accumulating credits for graduation. You're preparing for college applications. So a lot of the things that we may take for granted, since I'm not moving from place to place, it's pretty important to keep track of credits, service learning hours, recommendations for college, things that most kids just sort of understand is going to be what they'll be doing. But in military families, you really need to keep track of all that, because it can snowball. You think, well, wait a minute, when I was in Naples, I know I had a recommendation from my football coach, but we moved and that all got packed, and that stuff isn't going to be here for another month or so. So what am I going to do? You know, I need to try out for the football team here. So it's all those little, almost day-to-day kinds of things that we sometimes forget our military families are facing.
Yeah. What can teachers and school personnel do to help support the military families in those situations?
Well, I think the most important thing is just to reach out and find out who they are.
Yeah.
Know who your military kids are. Where are they coming from? What have their experiences been? And just really kind of acknowledge that you know, you're here, you're part of our school system, you're part of my classroom, and wow, what a wealth of experience you may bring to the other kids who are in the classroom. I think as a school, a school system, we can look to things like making sure that our staff members, particularly in the student services, get some training. There are some trainings out there, just things that we might want to learn about military culture. Because even though we live here and we have these institutions here, and even amongst the military, they will often say, I didn't know this was here, or I didn't know that was here. So there's a lot that we can do to educate ourselves about who is in this community. There are lots of resources out there that come through the Department of Defense. There are things that the Maryland State Department of Education has that school systems and individual schools can reach out and tap into. And then just with our individual schools and their staffs, I mean, I've been so lucky to work with so many of our schools who have taken the initiative Like one school that I'm thinking of, I mentioned that I have all these resources. Next thing you know, the guidance counselor has a little corner set up in her office, resources for military families, that kind of activity, actions really speaks volumes to our military families. Nothing makes them happier when they log on to Anne Arundel County Public Schools website and see supports, resources for military families. It's
That's
really
fantastic.
very important.
We're going to take a quick break. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
I'm Corporal Gamble with the Anne Arundel County Police. When driving through a school zone, please be cautious of pedestrians and children that could be near the road and or crossing the road. Fines in a school zone are increased.
Welcome back to At Your Service. We were discussing supporting military families. We're talking a little bit about supporting, how teachers can support, but what are some signs that educators and parents need to start to look if they're starting to see certain signs of distress or stress in their children due to parents being deployed or transition?
And that does happen. It happens frequently. And as I said previously, our kids are very strong, they're very resilient, but they're not invulnerable. The stressors that affect many families affect them, and some that other families don't experience affect them even more. As you might imagine, as a teacher, as a guidance counselor, as a school administrator, you would want to notice that child who all of a sudden is having excessive absences, or is coming to school and they're looking very disheveled, not like they usually look. Although that can kind of be funny sometimes. Sometimes it's the mom is the active duty and she's left on a deployment and dad is combing the hair and doing that. But the signs that you would look for would be a change in grades, a change in sort of emotional status, either more emotional or maybe even withdrawn. As I said, the excessive absences, loss of friendships or not reaching out and making friendships. These are things that our teachers do notice, and I think if they knew that that child was in a military family, they might be more apt to put two and two together and say, ooh, maybe we need to talk. Maybe we need to bring the guidance counselor in. Maybe we need to bring mom or dad or whoever the caregiver is, the caregiver in the home, to come in and talk about this before it sort of snowballs and they become academically at risk. Schools do a good job of that, but it really depends on how well you know your child.
Yeah.
It's huge. And so let's talk about supports. Supports that schools can provide in the classroom or just in general. You mentioned a little bit about teachers and how they can support the counselor, the school counselor putting a little stand with some resources for students, but what are some other easy, simple things that maybe a classroom teacher could do if they knew that a child was coming from a military?
And that's a very good point, because sometimes when our families are getting word that there's going to be a deployment or they're getting ready for a move, many families will come forward and tell the teacher, tell the school right away. Other families are reticent. They don't do that, and it's certainly their privilege to either let you know or not.
Right.
But both of those bring some different responses from the school system. When you know that a family is experiencing a deployment, if you're that teacher and you know just a little bit about what it means for a family to experience a military deployment, because we all see those programs on television where they're surprising the child in the gym and mom or dad is coming home.
Right,
and
they're jumping out of a
wonderful.
box.
Right. But what most people don't understand is that reintegration part is actually the hardest part of the whole deployment.
Yeah.
Wow.
We might think, oh, it's so wonderful, mom or dad is home. But that piece of returning home means that a family has already gone through a separation, quite a significant separation on both parts. Our military member, sometimes they withdraw just to sort of protect themselves before they're getting ready for a deployment. And then when the person is gone, that family usually picks up and carries on. We find that many of our kids, even our youngest kids, will take on responsibilities that perhaps a mom or dad has left behind for them, and they step up because that's what we do, because we're a military family. So, all of those things sort of play into that, and the family sort of becomes reorganized. Whoever the mom or dad left at home is now a single parent for that period of time. They may have to actually move again and go live with extended family while their service member is gone. And then when they come home, there's the entire readjustment all over again.
Yeah.
So as a classroom teacher, I've often, talked to teachers and guidance counselors, and just having shared that information with them, you can kind of see them going, okay, now I understand. Because I might be thinking, oh, Dad's home, that's wonderful.
Right.
The child or the student is now, well, now Mom and Dad aren't happy with each other because Mom was doing all this and now Dad's back and he wants to get back in the mix, or
trying to figure out each other's roles
and the
again.
role,
Exactly.
Isn't always easy.
Exactly.
Going from leading a house back to the child role, is, especially if you have a teenager or somebody who's really picked up that responsibility, that could be a huge
And the child also
transition.
could have a lot of different emotions. I should feel really happy, but now I'm not so happy because it's maybe feel guilty because maybe they liked Mom helping out with the homework and now Dad's
Absolutely.
helping out with the homework and it's not going as smooth. So there's a lot of things like that that is going on in the
It
family
really,
that people need to be
that's so
sensitive
true.
about.
That does happen. It does happen.
Yeah. So can you tell me a little about the military interstate compact?
Yes.
What is that all about?
Very important for our military families. I'm so pleased to say that in the last year, all 50 states have signed on, and
Wow.
the District of Columbia, which was awesome. So this is now the law. It has to go through the legislature in all of these states.
And what is it exactly?
And actually what it's a platform. It provides for
Correct.
the uniform policies, not uniform, but uniform in terms of consistent
Right.
policies across all states
Okay.
and the District of Columbia when it comes to military children.
Okay.
We talk about it as it's the leveling of the playing field.
Okay.
So in the past, a family may have come from another state or come from overseas, and a student who's in high school may need to retake a course, or perhaps they've come from somewhere where the mathematics sequence was different than what we do here in Maryland or in Anne Arundel County. And our students were asked to go to summer school, or a language that they took overseas somewhere. We don't teach that language here, so therefore we can't give credit. But what the Interstate Compact does, it really lets school systems know that they have some leeway, they have some way that they can now legally say, we will support our military families. There are a couple pieces to that. The first piece really has to do with enrollment, course placement, making sure that a student, as I mentioned before, coming from Florida in a magnet program, they get to apply for our magnet program here. Doesn't mean they get an automatic seat, but they get to go through the same process that any child who's been living in Anne Arundel County gets to do. Hugely important.
Suppose they'd already started, suppose the timeline had already ended. Do they
Anne
still
Arundel-
have that opportunity?
They do. Anne Arundel County has been so cooperative with that. I just cannot say enough about that.
Because the law protects them.
Absolutely.
And that's why.
Absolutely. And even the law protecting them, there's a way that can be played out in a way that's welcoming, or a way
Right,
that, we
right.
have to do this. And I'm just so proud that Anne Arundel County has just really reached out to these families. I'm
That's
just
great.
so very proud
Right,
of that.
and one of the goals, just because I'm very familiar with the military compact being high school, is
Yes.
to make sure that they graduate on time, if at all
Exactly.
possible. But we still have to follow, every state still has to follow their laws. But like Carol was saying, we do have flexibility. So if they have those 3 math, we have the rights to say they meet that math requirement, even though they might be a little different than ours, which is fantastic.
It is.
It really is. Well, I think you mentioned a little bit about magnets, but what about athletics and clubs?
Again-
Because that's huge engagement for children
Absolutely.
and families.
Absolutely it is. And that is addressed in the Interstate Compact under the extracurricular activities piece. Again, in the past, a student might move from another state or overseas, and they've been on the football team in California somewhere, and they move here and they just have missed the tryouts. Well, in the past, we would have said, gosh, sorry, come back next year. Now with the Interstate Compact, the school system on the receiving end really does have to give that student an opportunity to either be in a tryout, I've seen kids who have sent videotapes of their last orchestra concert to the receiving school on this end. The band director or the orchestra director will take a look at it. And none of this means that our students get automatic placement on a football team or a soccer team or in the orchestra. But it does give them a chance. It's that leveling of the playing field, because when we talk about moving and in the deployments and all of the challenges that our military kids experience, that extracurricular is a huge connecting piece for them. Huge. I mean, if you're on a team, if you're welcomed to be on a team, if you know that you can try out for a team, that's a wonderful way to sort of make yourself known in your new school and connect with some kids who are already there.
It's a huge engagement piece, you know, for the families and for the students that just transition, you know, every few years. It just makes them feel like they belong. And that's really what you want to do. It's not always about the engagement is going to be the clubs and the other sports and things, not always the academic pieces right away. But, you know, when I think about what resources are available in Anne Arundel County for military families?
Well, you have your human resources, which would be someone like me, someone like my counterpart at Fort Meade. We can come into schools with permission from the parent, always. And the schools, I have to say, have been extremely welcoming. There has never been a time when I haven't contacted a school and said, you know, we've got a family coming or a family's getting ready to leave. Always welcoming into the school. So that's a huge resource. Other things that we could bring to the table are materials. There are, for example, children's literature out there that speaks to a parent in the military or a parent going on a deployment. I can bring those things into the school setting. There are some trainings that are available through some of our bigger organizations like the Military Child Education Coalition. And a number of our schools have taken advantage of them. Actually, I have taken 7 of our high schools to training in Texas for a program called Student to Student, which is like a student ambassador kind of thing. So the resources are there. The Department of Defense has many kinds of resources, things that are online. There are tutoring services that are free and available to military families.
Are they at the? Oh, you're like, because
I'm like the same way.
Resources. Are they? Do they have to go to a particular location, or are they around the county at different spots?
The tutoring?
Yes.
Okay. The one that I was speaking of is something called tutor.com, which is available and free for military connected families, and it is awesome. Actually, what's so wonderful about it is when a student logs on and starts working with a tutor, they get the same tutor every time they log on. So it's a very one-to-one kind of situation. So you're working with that tutor online in preparation for an algebra quiz. You take the quiz, you get back online the next day and say, oh, you know, I missed this question, or I missed that question. That same tutor can then go back and say, well, remember, this is how we did this is how we did that. It's very valuable tool. There are tools that are available for older kids who are getting ready to take the ACT or the SATs. Some supports that are available through the Department of Defense. And then just within our military community, both on the Army and the Navy side, there are a lot of supports at places called the Fleet and Family Support Center. The Army calls theirs the Army Community Center. That is a full service, those are both full service institutions in terms of what they can provide to families, whether it be counseling, financial counseling, a spouse needing help finding a job, deployment. We're just getting ready actually to start up another deployment group. The families come and talk to one of our counselors. The kids come and they work with me. So all of those kinds of things. And we would love to tie the school system into any of those supports as much as we possibly can, because they go hand in hand.
Well, I just want to thank you for coming today, Ms. Chobany. I think it's very important just to get the knowledge out for all parties, from school system personnel to the families that, you know, transition into the Naval Academy or into Fort Meade. And I just want to thank you for joining us at Your Service. See you next time.